This has been in the news. Ryan Reynolds came out and said that he pitched an R-rated Star Wars project to Disney. He said that it wouldn't be vulgar or need to focus on the A-plus characters. I assume he means legacy characters. He wouldn't be in it because that would be a bad fit. And he says those kinds of IP exist very well on scarcity and surprise. We don't get scarcity really with Star Wars because of Disney Plus, but you can certainly still surprise people. I think there was another quote too that he said it would be used as a Trojan horse for emotion, is what the R-rated aspect would be of it. I posted my thoughts about it on Twitter and I said, an R-rated Star Wars project is inevitable and I hate it. They can't help themselves. They have to try to turn everything into the next Game of Thrones. And I went on to say that some people say that an R-rated Star Wars would be great, but I'm more interested in exploring what story that fits organically in this universe that needs to be told that way. If you just want it R-rated for the sake of it, you're basically asking for Rebel Moon. I think Star Wars at its best works when it's for everyone, and I don't like it when Star Wars pandered just specifically to children. But on the other hand, what is Hollywood's version of R-rated Star Wars? What would that look like? I don't know if I like that sort of pandering either. I cringe at what Ryan Reynolds' idea of an R-rated Star Wars would be. I just think it would be a gimmick, and it wouldn't be an organic part of the narrative. And my biggest issue is they just can't help themselves. Like, everything has to be more adult or rated R. It has to be more of a Game of Thrones. I certainly think that there are more adult, darker stories that I would love to see told. I don't necessarily think that that means R-rated. Will it serve the story? That can't be a pitch. My pitch is R-rated Star Wars. No. What is the story that you want to tell? What is the concept that you see? Will it fit organically within the Star Wars universe? It has to fit. It can't just be thrown in there just to have that mature rating. And I don't know if they could show enough restraint that would serve the story to where it wouldn't be just a gimmick. I think you could do it right, but I just don't trust Hollywood to do that. If your pitch is simply make Star Wars but rated R, well then that's Rebel Moon. That's exactly what Zack Snyder pitched. That was his official pitch to Lucasfilm. That was his idea and his vision for what R-rated Star Wars was. And clearly there needed to be more than that. That's simply what it was. It was just R-rated Star Wars. And it has to feel like it still belongs with other things. So if, for example, Andor continued to push the bar when it came to violence and sexual content, language, would it have fit then as it does with Rogue One and the original trilogy? I think you should still appeal to that audience. This, after all, is an entry that did connect with Rogue One, a film that was PG-13 and had that larger audience and larger fan base. And again, something that connected to the original trilogy. If they made it more graphic, just for the sake of being graphic, well, then it wouldn't fit as well. And you'd be denying those fans that watched Rogue One and liked the original trilogy, you'd be excluding them from accessing Andor if they did make it rated R levels of adult. It should fit together. I think they handled that very well. Obviously, the narrative didn't require them to go that far, to have that emotional impact, to feel the violence. At the end of the day, I do think it fits well within the established films, PG-13, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel like it's separate. It still feels like it belongs alongside Rogue One and A New Hope. And I think that's actually what most fans want. I just don't think an R rating was necessary for the story that they were telling with Andor. I think they pulled it off well in establishing the atrocities of the Empire and that darker, grittier, more realistic tone, but a tone that still felt organic to the IP, to the universe. Just saying R rating, what do you mean when you say that? What is Hollywood's version of what that means? Is Ryan Reynolds being a Zack Snyder? Because yeah, I just cringe at that. I think what most people and most fans and audiences have in mind is they just want Star Wars to be taken seriously. Star Wars has always had adult themes and content in it. It was just done in a way that didn't exclude those younger audiences. But as those audiences grew up, they could maybe see the nuance and the details as they're able to understand it, what was happening with slavery, and be able to feel the weight of mass murder and torture and all that. I think that's what fans and audiences mean, that they want the Empire to be formidable. I think most people don't want just needless, gratuitous sex and violence just for the sake of it being in Star Wars. Otherwise, yes, you're getting Rebel Moon. They just want great stories, and they want maybe that darker tone and to have adult sensibilities in mind when you're telling a story. But at the end of the day, it has to just be a good, engrossing story. And I'm all for a criminal underworld story following a bounty hunter. And I just think that we don't necessarily need to up the graphic content in order for it to be good. Actually, The Mandalorian was at its best when he was bounty hunting. And in the first opening minutes of the show of season 1, someone's getting cut in half. In Book of Boba Fett, when they have those 2 standalone Mandalorian episodes, it starts out with him bounty hunting again. And I like that whole sequence. It was dark. And I think he delivers his bounty's head to the client. He brought him in cold. And I think a show just on that, The Mandalorian just doing his thing, bounty hunting and exploring the different parts of the galaxy, like it would have been amazing if we'd seen Nar Shaddaa. That could be a fascinating story. We could see the seedy underbelly of the galaxy, see that darker, intriguing tone, and a live action would be amazing. Concentrating on a fantastic story, that doesn't necessarily mean it would require an R rating. Focus on the story first, I think, is the idea. And when I look at The Acolyte too, that was actually darker, and it did skirt the line with its sexual content. It had obvious implied nudity and obvious implied sexual tension, but that story was awful. So clearly there's more to the formula, and execution is extremely important. I think Andor did a good job of handling those adult elements with restraint and finesse while making it organic to the story that you were telling and making it organic to the universe that it was set in. So for example, like the Imperial droids, K2 droids, when they were unleashed on the Gorman crowds, that was scary. I felt the impact of that and the weight of that. They were slamming bodies to the ground, throwing them everywhere. I felt the impact of the drama and the violence in that. I think that was very dark, how they had it already, and they took Star Wars seriously. And it is for more adult, mature sensibilities, but it also didn't exclude younger audiences from enjoying it. And then later, in the next episode, K2's hallway scene definitely had a horror undertone to it. I loved that. He's picking off imps one by one, using that one imp as a human shield. That was dark and grim, and I loved it. So clearly, yeah, you can do that. I think that's just what people want when they talk about it, that you can have dark and grim and horror incorporated into the story to great effect. If your pitch is R-rated Star Wars, that just feels gimmicky to me. What is the story you want to tell? I think lighthearted, fantasy fare, and hardcore criminal element war stories in Star Wars should still feel like they belong together in the same universe. It should still feel consistent. Even if you have more lighthearted fantasy stories in Luke, and then you go to the Sith side of things and it's darker and more violent, I still feel like that consistency in tone would still feel like you're watching the same universe. And I think what Andor did was what Ryan Reynolds was saying, having that darker tone as a Trojan horse for emotion. Well, you can describe Andor that way. To me, Star Wars was always for adults until it started to pander to children. But children like adventure stories with mature elements in them. Children don't like to be pandered to or treated like Star Wars needs to have slapstick comedy or poop jokes for them to enjoy it. I think at the end of the day, just taking Star Wars seriously, not going too far, unless it's in service of the story, I don't know. But yeah, you could then make these stories to be accessible for everyone to enjoy.